retired NYPD Lieutenant and criminal justice professor Darrin Porcher here to weigh in on this one. So good morning to you, Darrin.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Let's talk first about Michael Bloomberg. He went to this church where that community particularly dealt with a lot of stop and frisk. The numbers in that community much higher. But is this apology too little too late for that community and others?
Well, I don't think it's so much of it being too little too late. I think that this is really a reflection on Bloomberg's leadership. If you're a leader, you need to stand behind your policies. And this is something that he stood behind. And then as we progress to now, he's now flip-flopping or he's folding based on the political sentiment for his perspective of running for president.
So you think it was a political sentiment and not really looking back as an elected leader who sometimes we ask them, look back and apologize if you thought something was wrong. Do you think he's actually sincere? Absolutely
not. Bloomberg was the mayor for 12 years. So he had 12 years to make a decision and an assessment as to what the effectiveness of this policy was. Whether you agree or disagree with it, it goes back to you being a leader. You need to stand behind your decisions and move forward. You need to analyze and ensure that what you're doing is a quality piece and move it forward. And I don't think that's what happened here.
You were a member of the NYPD during the stop and frisk policy. You were a lieutenant. You had to manage officers. What were the boots on the ground saying? Was this something the NYPD wanted to do in these communities?
Well, what the NYPD did, which I thought was a bad thing, was they quantitated the statistics of people that were being stopped and frisked, and that was used to leverage the crime stats. But we later came to find that there was no correlation between the number of stops and the precipitous drops in crimes. So when I look at my position as a practitioner, as a lieutenant in the NYPD, I was okay with it based on the neighborhoods that I worked in, because I worked in communities that had high violence, high crime. But when we look at it from the overall perspective of the city, it proved to be something that was ineffective as a result of the crime reduction.
So do you think that minority communities were targeted, and will they support Bloomberg moving forward? How do you think they will respond?
Well, the communities I worked in were primarily minority communities that made the phone calls that stated, hey, look, there's a person with a gun in this neighborhood. So officers oftentimes directed their approach to those 911 calls. But you have other communities outside of the communities that I worked in that saw things different.
But that led to people being stopped that should not have been stopped.
True, and we go back to, there's a landmark court case titled Floyd versus the City of New York, where the federal monitor realized that there was a disproportionately high number of African Americans that were stopped and frisked by police, and later the city was ordered to pay up millions of dollars as a result of that. So just based on the legal perspective, it was deemed to be inappropriate.
Always appreciate you coming in to talk about it with your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Darrin Porcher.